This allegation is from Virginia. In this civil suit from 2015, this is the civil suit that sought to overturn the sweetheart plea bargain Epstein received. Virginia said that the French girls, believed to be sisters, were a gift from his longtime friend and acquaintance, Jean-Luc Brunel. Now here's exactly what Virginia said. Jeffrey bragged after he met them that they were 12-year-olds and flown over from France because they're really poor over there. So, exploiting people at the lowest economic level in society. It's really sad. And their parents needed the money, or whatever the case is, and they were absolutely free to stay and flew out. She said she saw the three girls with her own eyes, and that Epstein had repeatedly described to her how the girls had massaged him and performed oral sex on him. They were flown back to France the next day. He was so excited about the entire event, replayed over and over again over the next course of weeks how cute they were, and how you could tell that they were really young. He went on to say how Brunel bought them in Paris from their parents, offering them the usual sums of money, visas, and modelling career prospects. Laughing the whole way through, Epstein thought it was absolutely brilliant how easily money seduced all walks of life, nothing or no one that couldn't be bought. And this guy supposedly killed himself when he bought his way out the first time around, and he had all these strategies, and he believed he could buy himself out the second time around.
I'm saying that there are people that were the people that did this to both me and Corey that are still working, they're still out there, and they're some of the richest, most powerful people in this business.
And they are.
And they do not want me saying what I'm saying right now.
Are you saying that they're pedophiles?
Yes.
And that they're still in this business?
Yes.
That's what, and that's what you were saying in your book. When you talk to when you talk to
and
parents,
they don't want me here right now. Trust
Corey,
me. They want me dead.
There are a lot of parents out here who want to put their kids in this business. Their kids are cute, they're great actors. Da, da, da. What would you say to a parent who just has the best of intentions, who's coming here with their child? If you're saying that there's a lot of predators in this industry.
It's a many-feathered bird. Okay? Be careful what you wish for. That's what I'll tell you. You know, don't go into it with naivety. Don't go into it thinking that it's all roses and sunglasses.
You're damaging an entire industry.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to say that it's a very important, serious topic.
Here in Los Angeles, in 2013, Child Protective Services took thousands of children away from parents. 570 children were murdered that were actually taken away from what Child Protective Services deemed to be unsafe homes, only to be murdered and killed within the homes that they put these children in. Wow. Only in Los Angeles County.
Wow.
Only.
That's a huge.
That's a huge number.
Who are they turning these kids over to?
Right.
Freddy Krueger? I mean, it's pretty gruesome.
I'm glad that you asked that, Sean, because actually what we did discover, and Los Angeles Times was kind enough to publish this, when we looked into it, 1,000 convicted sex offenders were given a green light to become approved foster parents.
Wow.
1,000 only in Los Angeles County.
That's pretty frightening.
That's very frightening.
And how do they get approval? That's
what we're trying to determine. I mean, we know that you have to go through fingerprinting. It's a very convoluted system.
Sure.
Molesters are not really considered so dangerous if they have been rehabilitated. And what does that mean, rehabilitated? They've gone to some classes. Maybe they've completed 26 weeks of therapy, and they feel much better.
Right.
What people have to understand is a pedophile, in the course of that pedophile's lifetime, will molest between 100 and 140 different children. So when we see these pedophiles that have molested this child and they get caught, please do not think for a moment that this is the only child.
Right.
This is the only child that had the courage to come forward and say what this pedophile, male or female, 20% of pedophiles are females,
A long list of failures at 3 institutions, say critics: Penn State, Second Mile, and police. At Penn State, janitors witnessed an alleged rape of a boy in the shower and did not report the year 2000 attack. 2 years later, a graduate assistant, later promoted to assistant coach, witnesses the rape of a second 10-year-old boy in the same shower area. He reports the attack to Joe Paterno, who, along with his superiors, do not report to the police. Sandusky is banned from bringing children to Penn State anymore, but is not reported to police. Then Second Mile. Should it have protected its children better? In 2002, the president of the charity was informed that Sandusky was banned from a local high school and could no longer escort children to Penn State football fields. He, too, never contacted police or kept Sandusky away from the kids. And today, that president resigned. And finally, the police. They investigated allegations as far back as 1998, and even after the mother of one of the victims let police listen in, as Sandusky asked for forgiveness, they dropped the case, warning no one.
If her son had been believed back then, that there wouldn't be victims that have come after him.
What I heard was a patient who had been in Bournemouth for 8 years told me that he had sexually assaulted her, and that he had then gone on to much younger girls. She said he had a preference for the younger women, and that the unit where she was had very young women, 16 and even younger than that, I believe. And she had become incredibly angry and upset about it, and she had confronted Jimmy Savile and told him that she was going to report him high up because she believed it was, my impression at the time, I can't remember exact words, but my impression I was left with was that she had felt that it was pointless to do anything but go to the top, because everybody was fully aware of what he was doing, and the fact that nothing was being done meant that she couldn't trust the staff who were around to do anything about it. And he had laughed in her face, is what I remember, that phrase very much, that she said he'd laughed in her face.
As a teenager, he was introduced to the world of Westminster. He says he was trafficked from Northern Ireland and that this picture was taken by one of his abusers.
I was used as a boy toy. I was an object, a sexual object.
Rumours of an alleged paedophile ring in the top echelons of society have been circulating for years. But for the first time, Richard's account of what happened to him as a boy links 3 locations. Dolphin Square, a luxury complex popular with MPs and civil servants. Kincora Boys' Home in Belfast, where boys were systematically abused. And Elm Guesthouse, a former gay brothel where young children are also said to have been molested. We brought Richard back to England from America, along with his counsellor, to revisit his past. His memories were vivid and distressing.
I'm sorry.
Bruce Ritter is a serial and was a serial predator. He was a serial rapist who used his collar in the position he was given by those in charge at the Archdiocese and at the Franciscan Friars to repeatedly rape the children under his charge. He was celebrated until the late 1980s. And then in 1989, some information came forward through the courage of a few kids that he had hurt them. And when an investigation opened, Bruce Ritter was then started to become known for something other than what he had been by a few, but not many. And then Bruce Ritter continued as he had before. and was given harbor and safe harbor by those that allowed him to found and fund and raise funds for Covenant House across the globe. Daryl Basile was one of those kids that he raped. And Daryl was one of the kids who, as a teen, found a way to share that awful thing that he had done. And Daryl Basile was also one of those people that told the police and the investigators. They never charged Bruce Ritter because he was given cover by all the powerful people. They never convicted Bruce Ritter for child rape because he was given cover by all the people in power and influence. And so Daryl Basile and dozens of other kids were left to suffer alone.
The peacekeeping force deployed by the United Nations has come under increasing scrutiny in recent years. That's due in no small part to allegations of sexual abuse by troops deployed in countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Central African Republic. A new investigation by the Associated Press finds the problem of sexual abuse and exploitation by peacekeepers is wider and even more disturbing than previously known. We found a lot of cases involving children, and as we were doing the reporting, we have a team in Haiti, and we sent our investigative reporter, Paisley Dodds, to Haiti, and eventually we stumbled across this internal report, investigative report from the UN, which chronicled this amazing tale of children that were in a sex ring that was abused and were abused by UN peacekeepers over a 3-year period. It was 9 children abused by 134 UN peacekeepers.
And these children were paid sometimes, what, a few pennies or $1 at a time for sex acts?
Yes, it was as low as there was food, yogurt, juice given to the children who were hungry, and that's why they did this. We saw the lowest amount we found was 75 cents, and the highest amount was $20.
On the one hand, the UN conducts what you call a thorough investigation, but then what happens after that?
You know, that's what's curious. It was really a very good investigation by the UN. They went to the children, they made sure that the children were not making it up. The children actually spoke Sinhalese, which was very telling. They showed pictures of 1,000 peacekeepers to the children, and the children identified various locations where they had sex with these, or were forced to have sex, or lured into having sex by these peacekeepers. So it was really quite a good investigation. What happened after that investigation is what typically happens at the UN, and is one of the reasons why this is such an important study or case study. It's the problem is that the UN is in a legal bind. As you said when you opened the segment, it does not have jurisdiction over any of these countries. So the deal is, here's our investigative report. Now it's time for Sri Lanka to come in and take a look at this report. And in this case, Sri Lanka did. 114 of the soldiers were sent home. But what happened after that is anybody's guess. There's no accountability. There are no names of any of these people, and nobody ever went to jail. So if you can imagine, these kinds of corroborated crimes against children over a 3-year period, corroborated by a UN investigative team, and then nothing happens.
Despite the investigation, Larry King remained free to feed his pedophilic parties with child victims. But in 1988, a routine review brought the Boys Town cases to the attention of Nebraska's State Foster Care Review Board.
And the information presented to the Foster Care Review Board, either via the telephone reports, the personal reports, or the reports we reviewed, Larry King's name was consistently present as someone that the youth were making allegations against. I mean, I turned that information over to authorities, and nothing happened. I would say we handed over at least a foot-high amount of material. Generally speaking, the allegations were ignored.
Omaha police now accept that Larry King may have been abusing children.
Morning, Roberta.
But its most senior detective claims he never received any evidence.
It is certainly possible that Mr. King was involved in illegal acts with children. If there was sufficient evidence of those types of allegations, he would have been prosecuted by the county attorney's office.
For me, it was very clear that the case was not investigated and not pursued because of the alleged perpetrators.
Those perpetrators named by the children formed a ring of rich and powerful pedophiles in Omaha. Men from industry, politics, the media, even the police. Besides Larry King, ringleaders were department store billionaire Alan Baer, and the celebrity columnist of the Omaha World Herald newspaper, Peter Citron. With the judicial system apparently paralyzed, Larry King's political and business empire grew. He courted the Republican Party nationally and plundered Franklin's accounts to finance a luxury lifestyle of limousines, private planes and palatial homes, 3 in Omaha and 1 in Washington, D.C. Franklin's records show he spent $10 million on jewelry, flowers and private planes. And his lavish spending bought him a charmed life.
Larry King was constantly heralded, cheered, applauded in the news media as the great businessman that's helping the poor people, the black community of Omaha.
I got those scars on my arm one night at a party where Larry King was, and he had brought somebody. I don't clearly remember who it was. Wanted to see how strong a men we were or something, and have us push our arms together. And you push your arms together. King has these same scars. And you push them tight together, and then you light cigarettes, and as soon as you get burning, you just drop them down between your arms and, let it burn. And they made us stand there naked and touch each other by holding our arms together and burn cigarettes. It's on film someplace. And then they filmed it.
Every victim witness who stepped forward in any way, or even was a potential witness that somebody heard about, has either been killed, put in jail under some theory or other, terrified or run out of the state, discredited. Every perpetrator, even the convicted ones, have been treated as conquering heroes. Obviously, the FBI was protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of old pedophiles having improper relations with little boys. They were protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of drug peddlers. They were protecting, in my opinion, they were protecting some very prominent politicians, some very powerful and wealthy individuals associated with those politicians and the political system, up to and including the highest political people in this entire country.
In search of answers, John DeCamp goes to Washington to investigate Larry King's powerful connections in the nation's capital. Paul Bonatti has come too. Larry King threw child sex parties at his $5,000 a month Washington house. Paul Bonatti was one of the victims.
Larry King's house down in Washington, D.C. was a nice house. It was on what I believe it was Embassy Row, because that's what they kept talking about. There were a lot of flags from different countries when you drove around in the area.
So tell me, Paul, how often did you come here?
I was about 14, about 1981, and at first it was about 3 or 4 times the first year. After that it was about once a month after 81.
And who brought you here?
Larry King brought me here.
And this is the actual house where you...
Yes.
And what, you were used for sex there?
Yes. Some of the parties, when they started off, were straight political type parties with no sex. And then when some of the men had left, some of the politicians had left, the ones that had planned on engaging in some type of sexual activity, that would come after the party. Some of the kids would be held downstairs in some of the rooms where if they acted up or if they started freaking out because of the drugs that they were on, they'd put them in a room that they couldn't get out of, and they'd lock them in.
Were there drugs at these parties?
Yes.
What kind of drugs?
Anything you wanted. Cocaine, heroin, speedballs.
You're telling me those things were at these parties where you had Larry King and prominent politicians?
Yes.
Were they readily available to anybody at the party?
At the after parties, they were readily available for anybody. Beforehand, they did it more upstairs than they did anywhere else, and it was kind of in the back rooms.
Were any attempts ever made that you know of to expose this situation?
As far as I know, nothing's ever been done, and most of the people that were in there had already been, I should say, compromised.
King's partner in sex crime was powerful Washington lobbyist Craig Spence. He took youngsters like Benassi on midnight tours of the White House.
So you were in the White House then?
Yes.
And how did you gain access?
Well, I came down with Larry King, but Craig Spence was the one that arranged the trip for us. And it was kind of a gift for our services that we were doing.
How many times were you on this kind of a trip?
I came to it on 2 times.
2 times. And were you used for sex on those occasions?
Not until after we left.
After you left the White House?
Yeah.
What time of night?
It was usually around midnight. To me, it was just kind of weird being in the White House at that time of the night, getting to go into places that the guy was telling us that nobody gets to go to. I've seen rooms in there that I'd never even heard about. Craig Spence and Larry King had a couple of groups. One was called Bodies by God, and they had the Cowboys, and there was another group that was started by Larry King, which was called the Golden Boys, which was kids that were usually under the age of approximately 10.
On the trail of Craig Spence, DeCamp finds the investigative reporter who exposed Spence's callboy network, Paul Rodriguez of the Washington Times.
We had uncovered a series of allegations from some minors, and it led me to a callboy operation here in Washington.
It sure fits with, this boy Paul Benassi. He tells the tale of being brought to the White House on occasion, kind of as a reward for the kid.
Craig Spence's dad committed suicide. He had advanced stages of AIDS. He was an AIDS carrier, and he killed himself. This was the thing that always bothered me. They claimed it was the largest male prostitution ring in the city that they've ever had uncovered. It was $1 million a year minimum.
Yeah.
And yet they only prosecuted the operator, Henry Vinson, and 3 of his lieutenants, as it were. Mm-hmm. They never went after any of the Johns or the clients. This operation, which was, again, quite large, claimed to have clients that ran from the White House to the Capitol Hill to the State House to the churches, within the media.
And that's precisely what Paul describes as the people he was with.
And a lot of the stuff led there, but we couldn't quite nail it at all cases because, again, to accuse someone of high stature, you've got to be very careful.
I understand.
We were able to do it through the mother lode, which provided us credit card receipts and canceled checks, and then lists of the clients. The prosecutors knew all this stuff. There was approximately 20,000 pieces of 20,000 documents that they had. They sealed the entire record when they found out I was accessing it. They required consent agreements from all the lawyers, all the clients, all the relatives of all the clients, all the hookers, including the clients themselves.
Which means you can never gain access.
They sealed them by court order. And we have we've attempted on several occasions to unseal that, and we've been told it'll be a cold day in hell before those records ever get unsealed.
The real cost, if I were going to say to my family, has been the fear and intimidation that's put in some of the kids. A couple of the kids are really, really frightened and really had some sleeping problems over it, hear this or that. So that's been the real concern I've had.
In the face of mysterious threats, Jon has turned for advice to his friend and one-time boss, former head of the CIA, Bill Colby.
Old Bill Colby told me better than anything. The one thing that the bad people can't afford is publicity, and knocking you off right now or doing something obvious to one of your kids would bring them more trouble than it's worth.
I said, you have to consider the possibility of some danger to not only your reputation, but to your person. I mean, there are
people do react rather violently to some kinds of charges, or particularly if they're true, there's more apt to be a negative reaction than if they're false. If they're false charges, then they can be reacted to in a normal way, by a libel suit or whatever. But if there's truth in it, there can be a danger in that situation. We've seen that happen in other cases.
Gary there was one piece of evidence I know he got that he even said he got one step ahead of him this time. He told us about this book. It was like addresses, telephone numbers, names. He said if they knew he had it, they'd kill him.
On July the 11th, 1990, Gary Caradori and his 8-year-old son, AJ, were flying home from Chicago. They had watched the All-Stars baseball game, and Caradori had been pursuing new leads.
Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are in Harold Cameron's cornfield, trying to determine what caused this private plane to crash, killing its 2 occupants.
The bodies of Gary Caradori and 8-year-old AJ were found in the wreckage.
National Transportation Safety Board investigators say wreckage from the crash is apparently strewn over a 3/4 to 1 mile long stretch in this field.
The fact that the wreckage is scattered over a large area certainly demonstrates that it did break up in flight. The exact mechanism of breakup yet is still unknown.
The federal investigation was never able to discover what tore the plane apart.
There are things missing from the plane. His briefcase is missing. Again, we'll never know what all was missing because I don't know what he had with him. I don't know what he did in Chicago. He may have had information he was coming back with.
Within 24 hours of the tragedy, FBI agents impounded all records of the investigation.
In my investigation, I've seen that it does go to the upper echelons of the Republican Party, and there's also a number of high-ranking Democrats, too. But if one steps back and they look at the power that was deployed to cover this up, okay, you had the Department of Justice in Nebraska, you had a hijacked grand jury in Nebraska, a hijacked state grand jury, and then you had a hijacked federal grand jury. And then in Washington, D.C., you had the Department of Justice and the Secret Service and also another hijacked grand jury. So you've got strings being pulled from the pinnacle of power to orchestrate this cover-up. And the fact that there's so many people involved in this cover-up really shows just how transcontinental this pedophile network was.
It seems that a group of children, little children, tiny children, up to the age of 6 or 7, were found wandering around in a park in Tallahassee, Florida. They were filthy and unkempt and in poor condition. They didn't even know their own names, and people living around the park called the police. The police found 2 men who claimed to be the children's guardians, and these men were promptly arrested on child neglect charges. The children and the 2 men said that the children were being taken, and this is where my blood ran cold, to a school for gifted students in Monterrey, Mexico. In Mexico. This was in 1985 this happened. It began to be reported in 86, 87. The children and the men were linked to a group called the Finders, a commune in the District of Columbia. There was a police search of a home in a warehouse where they found bags of evidence that contained photographs, computer records, other documents. They found an altar in the warehouse, and they found jars of urine and feces. They found pictures of adults and children together participating in the disembowelment and dismemberment of goats, as if in some satanic ritual. They found the children, pictures of the children, suggestive pictures of the children. And in fact, the head and skin of a goat involved in these things were discovered by Virginia State Police during a search of a farm belonging to the finders. So there's little question that there was something dreadful going on here. There was evidence that the finders had sent a telex to Hong Kong attempting the purchase of a child. There were books or papers showing instructions about how to get children from parents, how to buy children. In other words, these children had been not kidnapped, but voluntarily given away or given up by their parents. The customs agents, U.S. Customs, demanded a full-scale inquiry into this business of smuggling of children. But something happened then. The Central Intelligence Agency intervened and invoked the National Security Act and quashed the investigation. There is some evidence that the CIA admitted to owning the finders as a front for domestic computer training operations, but that it had gone sour. Well, if it had gone sour, why not let the investigation proceed? All reports concerning the finders case were and are classified secret. Secret. Representative Tom Lewis from Florida has asked some questions which remain unanswered. Could our government have something to do with this finders organization and have turned their backs on these children? That's what all the evidence points to, and there's a lot of evidence. I can tell you this, he said. We've got a lot of people scrambling, and that wouldn't be happening if there was nothing here. Now, that was in 1993. Since then, this has disappeared completely beneath the radar. It's gone. The finders are presumably fine. Nothing ever happened to anybody. Who knows what becomes of these children? How many children are involved, and what is being done to them and with them all over this world?
The police units, they've got the missing persons unit, which take records of this. So they knew about it. That would be given to the child protection units. They knew about it. And if it was prostitution, it would be given to the vice unit as well. Yet none of them were talking to each other. The vice unit wouldn't come to the meetings. The missing person team did, but they said, we're desk jockeys, we're desk bound. What do we do about it? So they knew about these kids, these failings, and did nothing. And all the time money was being made. So I wrote a very, very concise and factually based report, 2 paragraphs. I handed it in and to the intelligence unit. Within an hour, I got a detective inspector screaming down the phone at me, "Get to see me now." So I went in there and he starts what we call fuck chucking. Who the hell do you think you are? You effing, you can't put things like this. And he said, you're demeaning the unit. We've been doing this for decades and, who do you think you are? And it turned out that all these reports of these kids from the care homes, whenever kids went missing and turned up in red light areas, were archived. And I found these reports went back a long way. So they'd known about it for at least 15 years. They knew about it. Anyway, he said, "You're off the case." And I went, "Well, you can't kick me off." I said, "This has become my life." He went, "You're off it." It shut him down, and he just belittled everything. So I then went to see the chief superintendent, and I'm going to say this now, that he actually was a nice guy, albeit he is the architect and the instigator of everything that happened to me, but he was a very respected and liked guy. And I said to him, "Governor, what's going on?" He said, "Look, come and see me." And what he said to me, "Go and have a holiday, take as long as you want, and when you're nice and safe and ready to come back, and we'll have a chat." So I took the kids away, and I come back, and we sat down, and I said, "Governor, I don't know what I've done wrong. I thought this was going to be a good thing. I really thought I'd given them the goose that's shit in the golden egg here, And he told me, he said, "What the hell have you done?" He said, "This is going to F us." And I said the F word before, but I don't keep saying it. But he said, "This will F us past, present and future. You have no idea how deep this goes." He said, "If you mention a word of this outside of this room," he said, "you will be thrown to the wolves." And he said, "You will lose your home, your children and your job." I went to see 2 brothers twins, and I'm not going to give their names. They've been in the paper, but they told me something. And it was a Catholic home they went in Northern Ireland. And they weren't just raped themselves by priests. They were made to rape each other while all the priests sat around masturbating. And they were pimped out, and they were pimped out. Who were they pimped out by? The Catholic paramilitaries pimped them out. So we've even got, you know, the IRA involved in it because it's money. And when there's money, there's no sentiment and there's no conscience. And you know, this is what they said. This is what was happening. And if the kids said anything, they were kneecapped. And they were kneecapped on the school grounds. So it's a dangerous game, you know. I had a meeting with the Catholic cardinal. His name goes Vincent Nichols. Anyway, he wouldn't see me, so I saw his bishop instead. And I sat down with him, and I wanted to do an interview, but in the end it was just a chat. And I had someone with me that wouldn't let that person in the meeting. And he said, this bishop said to me, he said, you know, the Catholic Church, John, is in this soft Irish accent. He says, we've fallen victim to all these allegations. He said, sure, even the other day, he said, we had a bishop in Ireland went away for allegedly abusing young boys. And I said to him, Father, the Catholic Church is not a victim of this. That bishop went away because the law decreed he should get away, and because that was justice. I said, he went away for the rape and torture of a young boy. The victim here are the young children. Do you not see this? And he just wouldn't have it. And then he said, what a slur on a good man's name as well. And I went, who? He went, poor Ted Heath. And this was the bishop that's in charge of the London and the South said that. And I said, I'm taking my leave, Father. Do not get up. I'm off. And I walked out. And I did a little interview thing outside Westminster Cathedral, just saying, from now on, I brought up a Catholic. I said, me and the Catholic Church, that's it. We're parted. We're gone. I believe in Jesus because Jesus loves the children. But
why is that mindset so concrete, do you think? I saw that documentary about Sins of My Father.
Oh, right, yeah.
The one in America, and they just kept like bringing in these high-priced lawyers, making the victims out look like, you know, bad. And then they'd tell the family that justice would be served and this would never happen again, you know. And they just move him 20, 30 miles away and do it again. He had hundreds of victims.
Well, it was ironic because I went to a Catholic school and there was a priest there would come around your house, and he would do this thing where he had like this rough stubble, and he'd say to Mum, have they been saying their prayers? Have they been good? You know, and my mum would say, well, they haven't washed up. And he would lift you up and he'd rub your cheek on his cheek and say, you've got to be good for your mum. Right, he's a great big old beef smelly bloke. Anyway, years later, we had a big get together, people that went to school, and there was a lot of Irish kids. You know, we had a lot of Spanish, Irish, and you know, it was a Catholic school. And this Irish lad went to me, he said, "Has the police been in touch with you about Father so and so?" And I went, "No, why?" He said, "Did he used to come around your house and do that thing with his stubble?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, right. So he used to rub your willy on his stubble as well, did he?" I went, "No." And it turned out he was doing it to the Irish kids because they were more compliant and they would never say anything. And if something was said, nothing was said. Anyway, he was investigated and he was moved. And where did they move him to? They moved him to Kilburn, which is the biggest Irish community outside of Ireland. I mean, it just defies any logic. But it's not just the church that has done this. I mean, all religious institutions have done it. And, you know, this is just as shameful. When I was on the child abuse team in Haringey, and I say they need a public inquiry, they really do, into how this works. An allegation came in about an imam in the East End of London that had been fiddling with boys or girls or whatever, anyway, young kids. He'd been sexually abusing them. And went, right, we'll go and get him. I went, no, you can't do that. Why? We need a community meeting. So if say you're alleged to do something, right? No arguments. We go round, we get you, we search your house, we seize your computer, you come with us, right? And that's everyone bar the Queen that happens to. But no, because he was an imam, and it may well, if he was a rabbi, a priest or whatever, but any religious leader, they had to have a meeting with their unit and local community and all that before they made a decision, not a police decision, a collective decision to go and arrest him. And usually it was done on an invite so he can get rid of whatever he wants. And this is what had to happen. And this is what the police were part of, this multi-agency think tank that would do that. I mean, that is unconstitutional. It's perverse. It's corrupt. It's just bloody wrong, you know, and it's been going on and on and on. And they say the same things. They've got these independent inquiries, lessons learned. Well, what do they do with these independent inquiries? No one ever gets nicked. No one ends up going to prison for it. All it ends up doing is they'll bring out a new way of doing things. And another thing what they do is they absolutely leech everyone of every bit of valuable information they got. So all those that have come forward about Ted Heath. Mike Veal was a chief constable of Wiltshire, another incredibly brave man, and he warned me. He said, John, you be so careful. And I said, who's attacked you? Because it was your ilk that attacked me. You senior officers that have done me, of which I have no respect by him. He's a lovely guy. And he said, oh, with me, it come from the House of Lords and MI5. Because, again, it upsets the political and financial stability of the country, the economic stability and the financial stability. And it's always been used as a coercive tool. And one of the other things which doesn't get spoken about, which is prevalent, is satanic abuse. And there is a lot of that.
Before we get to that, then, let me ask you a question. What's your opinion of Operation Yewtree?
Well, again, Yewtree, I mean, was the Savile one, wasn't it, Yewtree? And saying that, Yewtree, their main office is in Stratford, in the East End of London. And I had to visit their office once. And there was a guy there, I knew him, I used to work with him in South London. And I walked in there, and he's at a desk. There's his chair and his mate's chair, and it's just stacked up like that with folders. And I went, you're busy. He went, this is Yewtree. So that was Yewtree. It was a desk full of folders like that. And so all this about it, you see it on the telly, these big operation rooms.
Yeah.
It was an old crappy desk full up with blue colour folders with two blokes hiding behind it.
Wow.
And that was Yewtree. Again, far too late. I mean, how much information was always been pushed out about Savile, and nothing was done about it. But not only that, there was allegations he was involved in satanic abuse as well, Savile, and necrophilia.
Do you think then that the targets of Yewtree, all these celebrities, were prosecuted to appease the public and to stop it from getting to the elite
100%.
Political level?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And there's some brilliant MPs. I had a letter writing campaign where everyone writes their MP about this cause. So it's a two-strand thing: protect the police, whistleblowers. Now, there's a lot of people that don't like the police, but we need a police force. Whichever way, I don't like them at times, but we need them. But the police are a valuable source of information. If they are silenced, this information dies. They cannot be silenced. There's got to be a law that if someone knows about it, cop or not, they have to legally speak out. And if it's covered up, they need to legally speak out and be properly protected, not attacked like I was, like Mag Gulliver was, like Lenny Harper was, and Mike Veal was. This is what they do to us. They try and demonise us. Now, I'm a bit different because I won't be silenced. I will not be silenced. I don't want to commit libel, and I don't want to be an idiot like that. And people are all saying names, all that. I'll do it in my own time, and I'll do it under public domain rules. But there will be information that is being shared all the time. Like I said to you about vetting, they will have these prominent ministers will have officers, protection officers, and they will know what goes on. One of them, he ended up as a security guard in Bond Street in the Jewellers, and he saw me one day and come up to me, and he went, and I think he was Leon Britton's protection officer, and he went, we knew what he was doing. We knew what he was doing, you know. And again, anyone who speaks out, they're crushed, they're hammered, they're put down, they're silenced, they're rubbish. He was on the street of London about 10, 11 years old. He said, doing every drug going, circa 70s, that area, very much when Audrey was on the street. And he said, I had a pimp. He said, but I had a pimp for safety. My pimp weren't a bad man. You know, my pimp helped me. And he said, all I knew, I just wanted drugs, and all I knew was just to be buggered, and that was it, really. And he said, but I've never gone on to do it to any kids, and I'm not interested. I got married, and so it didn't, you know, send in that way, you know, but it's just what they did to him, and he used it as a tool to get money. He needed to survive. And he said, one day a Rolls Royce pulled up round by the meat rack in Piccadilly. And he said, I went to get in, and he said, my pimp grabbed hold of me. He said, don't get in now. said the last 2 lads that have gone with them two, there's 2 men in it, bear in mind, white Rolls Royce. We haven't seen them again. We reckon they killed them. So he went, okay, I won't do that then. He said, but I was so rattling for the heroin. As the pimp turned around, he gesticulated to the car to like do a circuit, you know. So the car went round and he jumped in it. And he said they took him to a big house in Hampstead, in North London, a very affluent area of Hampstead. And he said the next thing he knows, he's in the Royal Free Hospital on life support. And he said for 3 days they buggered and just abused me so bad. All his bowel and his intestine were ripped open where they'd done God knows what to him. And they dumped his body, believing he was dead. And he was found and taken to the Royal Free. And he said, but as he was tripping in and out of consciousness, he said one thing that got him was these two were dressing up in suits to go to a wedding and had little presents for their niece to go to a wedding. And they're like bugging me to death, but virtually, you know. And I said this to someone once. I said, and this might sound very obscure, right? Part of the investigations that we would have to look into child porn and things like that. And that's what I'm saying about these coppers that have worked on these child abuse. They're just incredible, because most of us were drinkers. You know, there were 2 I worked with were actually registered alcoholics, because the work was just horrific and it was relentless, and we were absolutely overworked. The police refused to properly staff us, whereas if you went on a special branch or an anti-terrorist unit, you'd have a card, expense accounts, and I've been on similar units and had all these benefits. There we'd have to share a car, 1 car between 10 of us, and it was just awful. And I would say to people, right, play a child porn video, right? And they're gone about abuse. No, it ain't abuse. It's torture. It's ripping open body parts and putting them in extreme agony. And once someone's seen that, I'm telling you what, this bar the odd weirdo that would enjoy it, which would be a small percentage, 99.9% reoccurring would want the death penalty brought back the next day. And they would, when they've seen what they do to children, you know, and what they put them through.
Is the child porn more prolific than the physical abuse?
Well, they're both the same. They're hand in hand, you know, and each child porn image is a victim, you know. One person said to me that when she was put into child porn, she was drugged. So she said she didn't realise what was going on really until the drugs had worn off, and then she was in a lot of pain. And she usually was infected with all sorts of gonorrhea, syphilis and all that. I mean, things like that, which destroy the womb and can't go on to have children and all sorts. And if untreated, are deadly anyway. But she said with the satanic abuse was a bit different, because they needed you lucid. So they would give them hallucinogenics. She said, so the problem I have, because she has spoken to Operation Conifer, because with Teddy, because there was a link in with Teddy, for although she's a girl, there was a connection with it. She said my memory was skewed by the hallucinogenics, so my statements would involve places, but then there'd be butterflies and rabbits jumping everywhere, because she'd needed to be awake for the thing. So but again, easy to discredit, so easy to discredit them and call them. I mean, what we've seen with Cole Beach, this Nick, okay, the guy had child porn images and may well, probably is under the category of what they call a nonce. And I'll tell you how that come about, nonce anyway. However, the case when we had with Zoe, a lot of the people that gave statements or witnesses were crackheads, heroin addicts and prostitutes. They called it herding cats. It was one of the hardest ways to get witnesses to a court. But we did it, and people actually said, you know, I have lived this life. However, seeing a child in a crack house making to do this and to do that is wrong, and I'm not having it. So you can win. And there is a way of doing it, and you just got to be very resolute and a stalwart in what you do. But what they've done is they've just concentrated on him being a fantasist and everything else, and really sort of sidetracked what he's gone. And now what you're seeing is people like Daniel Janner, which is Lord Janner's son, coming forward and saying we've got to stop these people from coming forward. So virtually saying that anyone who comes forward now has to be treated as a liar. And can you imagine what that's doing to the victim and survivor community? They must be absolutely screaming. And they've done it on purpose to stop anyone ever getting. The other thing they do is Sean, they're giving over the top sentences. So he got 18 years. I mean, my God, 18 years. He didn't kill anyone. He's upset people by making allegations, which in my opinion are true allegations against perverts. We saw it with this woman, Sabine McNeil, who spoke out about the satanic abuse in Hampstead. She was given 9 years, a woman in her 70s. And we just had another guy who's exposed, I think it was Venables, the kid involved with the Jamie Bulger thing. He sort of exposed him, and he's just been given nearly a year inside. So they're really hammering them to silence them, you know. And it's just through, when you look at it, it's just a perverted country.
Last year I had a case where a lovely young girl was single mom. Mom's a great Italian woman, lives in Burbank. And she was having some problems with her daughter. Her daughter started hanging out with the wrong, crowd. Good girl, though. Just, needed to be pulled back in.
The bling
Yeah.
ring. She'll end up robbing from Paris Hilton's house like the bling ring was.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So Mom calls a friend at the police department. She says, I'd like to put a little scare. I want to do something. I want to make sure she's okay. And, he says, call Child Protective Services. Okay, I'll try it. She called Child Protective Services. They said, we need to take her and, help out here. They put this child, gorgeous, I mean, she looks like a model, 16 years old, 15 at the time, in this group home. The mom goes to visit her. It was near the holidays. Goes to visit her. She feels like, all right, she's going to learn her lesson. She'll never mess up again. This is a hardcore lesson. Her daughter's gone. Her daughter and 3 other beautiful young girls. Now, you have to bear in mind, Sean, that the gates around this group home, locally, are high. They're too high, and they are locked, and they're electronic. You are not getting out. Yeah. And there's a full staff. Well, the staff says, gee, we were short-staffed, and we just don't know how this gate got open. This mother daily for over 1 year posted, she came on my show. She did not stop looking for her daughter. Her daughter is home. She found her through the efforts of a combined community effort. And she is still healing. She was passed on to more people. She was so abused. She was locked up. She was a prisoner.
And it was basically sold to a sex.
Her and 3 others from a state-run group home. And how did the gates get open? Well, it was near the holidays, and they just don't have an answer. In Orange County last year, they had a bust for these traffickers. They got 105 people, victims of trafficking, human trafficking. 65% of those victims were wards of Child Protective Services. Not only were they wards of Child Protective Services, but check this out. They were never reported missing.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So maybe they were literally sold by people within Child Protective Services.
Well, what we're finding now is this trafficking is a lot bigger and a lot more involved politically than we care to look at or the media won't cover. Everybody's afraid because there's some real big heavy hitters that are very influential that are involved.
And the acquisition of the children was for sexual purposes?
Absolutely. Children are sold, and there have been cases, children are sold up to 75 times in one day. One day. 75 different Johns abuse this child.
Right.
It's making the child trafficking industry, or human trafficking, I should say, industry right now makes more money than the illegal drug trade and illegal arms trade combined.
Wow.
Combined. So children are definitely a commodity. They're a commodity to make money.